Have you ever faced a moment when one decision, one single second, could change everything you believed about yourself? Imagine sitting on a plane, holding your child's hand, when the only thing keeping him alive is thrown away by someone who doesn't even ask why. What would you do? Stay silent and pray for mercy, or stand up and fight for your child's life, your dignity, your truth? On Flight 237, at 35,000 feet, a father's calm voice silenced the chaos. A flight attendant's mistake became the spark of a movement, and a little boy's fragile breath forced an entire nation to ask, when did following rules become more important than saving a life? If it were you in that seat, what sentence would define you, anger or compassion, revenge or change? Tonight, we're diving into the story that shook the skies and grounded hearts, the story of a man who turned pain into purpose and taught the world the true meaning of humanity at altitude. Before we take off, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this is one flight you won't want to miss. The hum of the engines filled the cabin like a low heartbeat. 37,000 feet above the Midwest. The world below was nothing but white cotton and slow-moving light. Ethan Cole rested his hand on the small shoulder beside him. Noah slept with his head tilted against the window, a comic book still open on his lap. The boy's chest rose in short, careful breaths. Each one counted. Ethan checked his watch. 45 minutes until the next dose. He had timed everything: temperature control pack, sterile syringe, even the seatbelt light pattern. Flying with a rare disease medication wasn't something he could leave to chance. A flight attendant passed by, asking if anyone wanted pretzels. Ethan smiled politely, declined, then reached for the insulated pouch under the seat. He opened it just enough to confirm that the silver vial was still there, safe inside its foam cradle. The vial shimmered faintly under the overhead light. VX9. Experimental gene therapy compound. 1 dose every 4 hours. Miss one, and the seizures could return violent, unpredictable, life-threatening. Ethan exhaled slowly. He tried not to think of hospitals. He tried not to remember the night when his wife, Maya, collapsed from exhaustion at the children's ward, a night when a nurse had doubted his credentials, questioned his right to be there, and cost them precious minutes. Bias, he had learned, doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it smiles and says, "Sir, calm down." He looked at Noah, 8 years old, half of him sunshine, half of him glass. Ethan brushed a curl from the boy's forehead. "You good?" Buddy Noah blinked awake. "Yeah, Dad." His voice was thin but brave. "Does San Francisco have clouds like these sometimes?" Ethan said. "But they're bigger, more like dreams than clouds." The boy grinned, satisfied with the answer. He went back to sketching in his notebook a superhero in a sky blue suit, arms spread, lightning on the chest. Across the top of the page, in block letters, "The Sky Guardian." Ethan smiled. The kid had drawn that hero since the first hospital stay. A man who could control storms but chose not to hurt anyone. Maybe because Noah saw that same restraint in his father. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm, rhythmic, routine. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Lewis Park. We'll be cruising at 37,000 feet. Smooth air ahead. Enjoy your flight." Ethan leaned back. He glanced at the empty seat beside Noah. The airline had offered a courtesy upgrade, maybe because the CEO of Neurogenics was traveling, maybe because the agent had recognized his name. But Ethan hadn't told anyone who he was. Titles meant nothing when your child's health was hanging by a thread. He opened his laptop, scanning through an unfinished presentation, AI-driven predictive models for genetic disorders. Work that could save kids like Noah if he could keep going. Then he heard a voice. "Sir, excuse me." He looked up. A woman stood in the aisle. Tall, mid-40s, perfectly pressed uniform, name badge shining. Clara Reynolds? Her smile was professional, but her eyes were measuring. "Yes," Ethan said. "I couldn't help noticing the silver pouch under your seat earlier," she said lightly. "For security, we're required to check any untagged liquids or vials." Ethan's hand froze. "It's medication," he answered. "Prescription only. Temperature sensitive." Her smile thinned. "Do you have documentation?" He nodded, already reaching for the binder neatly labeled, laminated. "Everything's here. Letter from Vidian Pharmaceuticals and clearance from TSA Medical Transport." Clara flipped through it. She paused on the signature page. Her eyes softened for a moment, maybe at the child's name, maybe not. Then something shifted. Her gaze drifted to Noah's dark skin. The curls, the small hands gripping a drawing pencil, a tiny hesitation, barely visible. But Ethan saw it. He had spent years recognizing that pause, the half-second where suspicion blooms. She smiled again, too quickly. "I'll have to confirm this with my supervisor. FAA policy, you know." He kept his tone even. "Of course. Just please keep it level. It can't be shaken." She nodded and walked away, clutching the binder. Noah looked up. "Dad, are we in trouble?" Ethan forced a small laugh. "No, buddy. Just a little mix-up. Like when someone spells your name wrong at school." Noah nodded and went back to drawing. Ethan stared out the window, watching the clouds pass like unspoken arguments. In the galley. Clara placed the binder on the counter. Her hands trembled slightly. Inside her head, the past replayed like static. Her brother, Aaron, 8 years old, same as that boy. He had died in their kitchen 23 years ago, after drinking from an unlabeled vial their mother had stored in the fridge. She had found him. She had blamed herself. And she had promised never again. Now, that same image, a silver vial, a child burned behind her eyes. Marcus Hale, the purser, entered. Everything all right. "Clara," she straightened, "just following protocol. Passengers calm. For now." She hesitated. "But people lie. Marcus, you know they do." He looked at her, measured, and sometimes they don't. Back in row 2, Noah's coloring broke into shaky lines. His small fingers trembled. Ethan felt at first the subtle twitch under his hand. He checked his watch again. 30 minutes left. He needed that dose soon. He pressed the call button. Clara returned, holding the binder tight against her chest. "Ma'am," he said, still calm. "I need to administer my son's medication in about 30 minutes. Everything in that pouch must stay sealed and cold." Her jaw tightened. "I understand, but I've contacted the supervisor for verification." "On the ground?" "Yes." Ethan's voice lowered. "That could take hours." "I'm sure it won't," she said, with that practiced airline smile. The sound of her heels faded down the aisle. Ethan stared after her. Mind racing. He replayed his own seminar's unconscious bias training. Empathy algorithms, human error. It all looked so simple on slides. In real life, it was the difference between life and death. He looked at Noah again. The boy was shivering, though the cabin was warm. "Hey," Ethan whispered, "remember Sky Guardian? He always fights the storm." "Right." Noah managed a weak grin. "Yeah. Then that's us." "Okay. Just a little turbulence." The boy nodded, eyes fluttering closed again. Outside the window, sunlight flared against the wingtip, Brilliant, brief, blinding. Ethan wondered if Maya was somewhere beyond that light, watching, steadying him. In the front galley. Clara stared at the binder, the words blurring. VX9. Experimental gene therapy requires strict handling at 40 Fardig. She heard the echo of her brother's cough, the crash of glass, her mother's scream. She whispered to herself, "I'm just keeping people safe." Then she reached for the service phone. "Captain, it's Clara. I need confirmation on a medical transport issue." "Go ahead," said Captain Park. "There's a passenger carrying an unlabeled vial. Claims it's experimental medication. Clearance papers look unofficial." A pause crackled over the line. "I'll trust your judgment." "Clara," the captain said, "handle it per policy." She exhaled, hand shaking slightly. Then she glanced at the silver pouch under seat 2A. From her angle, it looked ordinary, too ordinary for something so important. And inside her chest, fear whispered louder than reason. Ethan rubbed his temples, exhaustion pressing at him. He closed his eyes for a second, just long enough to miss the sound, the faint scrape of footsteps beside his seat, the zip of a pouch being lifted, the quiet click of a service door opening. The cabin lights dimmed. Outside, the sky deepened into late afternoon gold. Noah stirred. Dad Ethan looked down, smiled automatically. "Yeah, buddy." But before the answer came, there was a metallic clank from the galley. A hiss, low and final, the sound of the waste compactor sealing shut. Ethan froze. Every muscle in his body went still. He looked toward the aisle, saw Clara returning, empty-handed. "Where's the pouch?" he asked quietly. Her eyes flickered. Unreadable. "Sir, for everyone's safety, I had to dispose of the vial. It was unverified. For a heartbeat." He said nothing. Then he whispered, barely audible, "You threw it away." "For regulations are clear, Mr. Cole." Ethan's throat tightened. That vial was my son's life. The hum of the engines continued, indifferent, eternal. For a moment, silence stretched across the cabin like a cracked window. Ethan Cole didn't move, didn't even breathe. His pulse thudded in his ears as the words settled in. "You threw it away." He rose slowly from his seat, his voice still calm, dangerously calm. "That vial was not a threat," he said. "It was my son's medication. You had no right." Clara Reynolds took a step back, startled by how quiet his anger was. "Sir, please sit down," she said, voice clipped but shaking. "I followed procedure." Procedure, Ethan's tone hardened. "You destroyed a child's only dose of experimental therapy, one that isn't replaceable at 37,000 feet. Around them, whispers rippled. A woman in seat 3B muttered, "What's going on?" Someone else reached for a phone. Noah stirred in his seat, eyes half open, confused. "Dad." Ethan knelt beside him, his composure cracking for just a second. "It's okay, buddy. Just rest." He turned back to the flight attendant. "You've just endangered a passenger's life," he said evenly, "and you don't even realize it." Clara's lips parted, her eyes darting toward the cockpit. "I was protecting everyone. There was no label, no proof." "There was proof," he said, "in your hands. You read it." She swallowed hard. "People fake documents all the time." "And what about people who tell the truth and get ignored because of the color of their skin?" Her expression faltered, a tiny flicker of shame passing through before she masked it again. "Sir, please sit down. You're making the other passengers nervous." Ethan looked around. A few heads turned away. Some looked guilty, others merely curious. He saw it, the quiet, familiar discomfort that followed black men who stood up for themselves. He'd seen that look in boardrooms, in conferences, at charity galas, where he was mistaken for the driver of his own car. He'd learned to keep his tone smooth, his gestures small, his fury folded like origami inside his chest. But now, his son was in danger. He straightened, towering over Clara, though his words stayed level. "Call your captain," he said. "Now." She hesitated, clutching her radio. "He's busy with navigation. Then I'll call him myself." He reached for the intercom on the bulkhead. Marcus Hale, the purser, appeared like a gust of common sense. "Let's slow down," he said gently. His deep voice carried authority without force. "Clara, what's happened?" Clara stiffened. "I disposed of a vial. It wasn't cleared." Marcus blinked, his face draining. "You what?" "It could have been dangerous. It could have been medicine," he said quietly. "Why didn't you check with medical dispatch first?" Her jaw set. "Because I made the call I thought was right." Marcus looked at Ethan, at the boy's pale face. "Sir, let me talk to the captain." Ethan nodded once, fists clenched by his sides. As Marcus disappeared toward the cockpit, Clara lingered by the galley wall, her breathing shallow. Every instinct told her she'd done what was necessary. And yet, beneath that certainty, something corrosive stirred doubt. She'd seen that man's eyes. They weren't angry eyes. They were terrified. "You threw it away." The words replayed again and again. In row 2. Noah whimpered, a soft, gasping sound. Ethan crouched beside him. "Hey, buddy, stay with me." He brushed the boy's cheek. It was hot, clammy. His breathing quickened. Ethan reached for his phone, but there was no signal at cruising altitude. He bit back panic, remembering the emergency pack still in his carry-on cooling gel pads, seizure watch, glucose tube. But none of it could replace the dose. He closed his eyes for one long breath, then another. "Stay calm. He needs you steady." When he opened them again, Clara was standing a few feet away, uncertain, guilty, still clutching her radio like a shield. "Look at him," Ethan said quietly. "Does that look like a threat to you?" She didn't answer. Ethan continued, voice trembling but steady. "I built a company that uses artificial intelligence to predict seizures like this. We design systems to help people understand what fear looks like before it turns into harm. And yet, here I am, watching fear destroy the very thing that could save my son." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it was thin, almost inaudible. Ethan didn't reply. He looked at Noah again, at the way the boy's chest fluttered, and felt a helplessness he hadn't felt since the night his wife died. That night, the nurse on duty hadn't believed him either. That night, protocol had outweighed compassion. That night, Maya's voice had been the last calm thing he'd ever heard. "Promise me," she had said. "Promise me you'll keep believing in people." He had, until now. Marcus returned, pale, his headset still around his neck. "Mr. Cole, Captain Park wants to speak with you in the galley." Ethan stood, giving Noah's hand a final squeeze. "I'll be right back. Buddy." As he followed Marcus forward, every passenger watched him. Some whispered, some avoided his eyes. He'd felt that gaze before, too, the weight of judgment wrapped in curiosity. The galley smelled faintly of coffee and burnt plastic. Clara stood to the side, rigid, her eyes rimmed red. Captain Lewis Park looked up from the comm console, calm, composed, but serious. "Mr. Cole," he began, "my attendant tells me she disposed of a vial that may have been medical in nature." "It was," Ethan said flatly. The captain nodded. I understand your concern, sir, but we have to prioritize cabin safety. Ethan stepped closer. Safety. My son's dying back there because your crew doesn't understand the difference between caution and discrimination. The captain's jaw tightened. Are you accusing my staff of racism? I'm accusing them of blindness, Ethan said. A blindness that kills people who look like me every day. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the muffled engine and the faint rattle of trays. Then Marcus spoke softly. Captain, the passenger provided verified documentation. I checked it myself. Captain Park hesitated. And the vial? Gone. Ethan said, crushed. The captain's composure cracked for the first time. Crushed. Ethan's voice lowered, deliberate, every word measured. You need to understand what that means. That vial was a Phase 3 gene therapy sample. It was worth millions. Yes. But more than that, it was irreplaceable. Without it, my son will seize. And when he does, you'll have a medical emergency you could have prevented. Captain Park looked from Ethan to Clara. The weight of realization began to settle. Get medical assistance ready, he ordered quietly. Then to Clara, you'll stay here until further notice. Clara nodded numbly. Her hands trembled. Ethan turned away, gripping the wall to steady himself. He had won the argument, but the victory tasted like ash. As he walked back to his seat, the cabin lights flickered. Noah was awake, staring at him, eyes glassy. Dad, he whispered, I don't feel good. Ethan knelt, forcing a smile that cost him everything. I know, son. Just hang on. Help's coming. Outside, the horizon burned orange and violet, a sunset splitting the sky in half. Inside, time was running out. Clara Reynolds sat frozen in the narrow galley, the faint vibration of the aircraft thrumming through the soles of her shoes. The captain's quiet command still echoed in her ears. You'll stay here until further notice. The words clung to her skin like frost. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but every reason she could summon crumbled under the weight of what she had just done. She looked down at her hands, still trembling, her neatly manicured nails smudged from handling the trash compactor. The memory came uninvited, the metallic clank, the hiss, and the final crunch. The sound had felt righteous a few minutes ago. Now it haunted her like the tolling of a bell. Her mind drifted to another sound. Years ago. A kitchen clock ticking in a quiet house. She was 19. Her brother Aaron only 8. Their parents were out for the night, leaving her in charge. He'd been curious. Too curious. Always playing scientist. She'd walked into the kitchen to find him coughing, clutching his throat, a glass bottle shattered at his feet. The smell of chemicals filled the air, sharp and strange. The ambulance siren had screamed through the night, but it was already too late. Ever since that night, Clara had lived by rules clear, written, unbending. Rules were her armor against chaos. But now, at 37,000 feet, she realized she had wrapped that armor so tightly around herself that she could no longer tell the difference between safety and cruelty. Marcus Hale stepped quietly into the galley. His usually calm face was drawn tight with concern. Clara, he said, his tone careful, the boy's in distress. You need to understand how serious this is. Her voice cracked. I was just following what we're told. Unlabeled liquid, unverified container. It's in the handbook. Marcus, I've done nothing wrong. He sighed, shaking his head. Sometimes doing nothing wrong isn't the same as doing what's right. She looked away, blinking hard. You think I wanted this? I think you were afraid. he said simply, "and you let that fear make the choice." The words landed like stones. Fear, yes. It had always been fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of mistakes. Fear of being the reason someone else died. But what about now? What if she had killed someone again, not by neglect, but by obedience? Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. He didn't look scared. Marcus, he looked furious, like he wanted to punish me. He looked like a father. Marcus said, "And you took away his hope." The intercom crackled, calling for medical assistance if any doctor was on board. The sound made Clara's stomach drop. She turned toward the curtain that separated the galley from the cabin, and for a second she wanted to rush out, to undo what couldn't be undone. But her legs wouldn't move. Through the small gap in the curtain, she caught a glimpse of Ethan kneeling beside his son, whispering something she couldn't hear. The boy's little body shook with tremors. The sight ripped through her. "God," she whispered, "what have I done?" Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "Go talk to him," he said quietly. "Maybe it's not too late to help." She shook her head, terrified. "He'll hate me. They all will." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but hiding won't make you right. For the first time in 20 years. Clara felt the edge of the armor crack. She stepped out slowly, her heart pounding. The aisle seemed longer than any runway she had ever walked. Every face she passed turned away, pretending not to watch. When she reached row 2, Ethan looked up. His eyes weren't furious anymore. They were hollow, focused entirely on the child in front of him. Clara swallowed, her voice small. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand." He didn't answer at first. He was holding Noah's hand, counting breaths under his breath like a prayer. "Understanding doesn't matter anymore," he said. "Action does." She knelt down beside him, breaking every professional rule she knew. "Tell me what I can do." Ethan didn't look at her. "Can you bring back what you threw away?" The question hit her like a slap. She couldn't answer. Her throat locked up. From behind them, a calm, confident female voice spoke. "I'm a doctor." Clara turned to see a woman in a gray sweater stepping forward, a medical ID hanging around her neck. "Dr. Amelia Hart." She introduced herself. "Pediatric neurology." Ethan looked at her with instant recognition. "You're from Stanford Medical, aren't you?" "Yes," she said, already kneeling beside Noah. "I saw the seizure pattern. We need to stabilize his breathing and keep his airway clear." "Do you have rescue meds?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "You know what happened." The doctor's expression darkened, but she didn't waste time. She snapped instructions to Marcus. "Get me cold water, towels, and sugar packets now." Clara stood frozen, guilt pressing down like gravity. Marcus brushed past her, and she stumbled back into the galley, her mind racing. Her eyes fell on the waste bin. The compactor door was still warm to the touch. She hesitated, then pressed the safety lever. The mechanism hissed open with a metallic groan. Inside, sealed within a half-crushed foil pouch. She saw it, the shattered cooling pack. The glint of the glass vial cracked but not completely destroyed. Her heart stopped. She reached in, ignoring the sharp edges that sliced her hand. The label was gone, but the liquid inside shimmered faintly. Blood dripped down her wrist, but she didn't care. She grabbed a paper towel and ran down the aisle. "Wait," she shouted, her voice echoing through the stunned cabin. Ethan looked up, disbelief and anger flashing in his eyes. "What are you doing?" Clara held out the vial, trembling. It's damaged. But maybe the liquid, Doctor. Hart snatched it gently from her hands, examining it under the light. If the seal isn't fully broken, we might still save part of the dose. Ethan's breath caught. Can it work? I don't know. Doctor, Hart said, but it's better than nothing. Clara stood there, blood still dripping from her hand, watching as the doctor drew a tiny amount into a sterile syringe and administered it under Noah's tongue. The cabin went silent. Every passenger seemed to hold their breath. Noah's tremors slowed, just barely. His breathing steadied. Ethan's shoulders sagged, his head dropping forward. Relief, fragile and trembling, filled the air like oxygen after a storm. Dr. Hart nodded slowly. We bought time, but we need to land. Ethan exhaled shakily, eyes wet. Thank you, he whispered to her. To the doctor, maybe to the universe. Clara stepped back, tears streaming freely now. She had saved nothing fully, but maybe for the first time in her life, she had tried for the right reason. In the cockpit, Captain Park's voice cut through the intercom. This is your captain. We are diverting to Denver for an emergency medical landing. Please remain calm and seated. As the aircraft began its descent, Clara pressed her bleeding hand against a napkin, staring at the streak of red. She thought of Aaron, of rules, of fear, and realized that safety without compassion wasn't safety at all. The cabin lights flickered as the jet began its sharp descent. The hum of the engines deepened into a low roar that rattled every panel and heart aboard. Overhead bins trembled, and cups rolled across the service cart. Passengers clutched armrests, some praying, some whispering. The air had changed. It was heavier, urgent, electric. Ethan Cole sat rigid beside his son, his mind split between the present and the nightmare ahead. Noah lay against him, head resting on his lap, eyelids fluttering but breathing steady for now. The doctor's quick intervention had given them time, but it was a fragile mercy. Ethan's fingers kept brushing the boy's curls, grounding himself in that small, rhythmic motion. You're doing great, buddy, he murmured. Almost home. Dr. Amelia Hart crouched across the aisle, monitoring the child's pulse. Her voice remained calm, each instruction crisp and confident. Keep him at a 45-degree angle. If he starts seizing again, turn him to the side. We're almost there. Marcus Hale moved through the aisle like a silent guardian, checking passengers, distributing tissues, water, reassurance. His voice a steady, deep current kept panic from spreading. Everyone, please stay seated. We're making an emergency landing in Denver. The crew is trained, and help will be waiting. At the front, Clara Reynolds stood by the galley wall, hands still wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Her uniform was streaked with blood, but she didn't care. She could still hear Ethan's words echoing in her head. That vial was my son's life. It wasn't a reprimand anymore. It was truth carved into her conscience. She caught Marcus's glance. He didn't need to say anything. The look in his eyes said everything. Stay strong now. Redemption comes through action. She straightened, drawing a shaky breath. She walked toward row 2 again, where Ethan and the doctor worked in tandem like two pieces of the same machine, built from fear and hope. Mr. Cole, she said softly, I've arranged for paramedics to board immediately upon landing. The hospital's already prepped for a pediatric emergency. I radioed ahead. Ethan looked up at her, and for the first time, there wasn't only anger in his eyes. There was exhaustion, and maybe, somewhere deep behind it, gratitude. Thank you, he said quietly. Just keep the descent steady. Clara nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I will." The seatbelt sign chimed. The captain's voice came through, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Park. We're beginning our emergency descent into Denver International. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing." The air pressure shifted. The cabin tilted. Ethan braced one hand on the seat in front of him as turbulence rolled through the aircraft like a slow-motion wave. A collective gasp rippled across the passengers. Dr. Hart held onto the armrest but never lost her focus. "He's still responsive," she said. "Steady. That's a good sign." Outside the window, clouds churned in violent spirals, streaked with orange from the dying sun. Denver lay somewhere below that chaos, unseen, waiting. Ethan felt Noah twitch, a faint spasm running through his small frame. "No, no, no," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Not now. Doctor." Hart leaned closer, eyes sharp. "We're okay. Just keep him calm." She reached for a water bottle, poured a drop against the boy's lips. "Noah, sweetheart, stay with us. You're flying through a storm. Remember, Sky Guardian never gives up." At the mention of his hero, Noah's fingers twitched, weakly sketching a shape in the air, a line, then a curve. "Guardian," he mumbled, barely audible. Ethan's throat tightened. "That's right," he whispered. "You're the hero. Buddy, we just follow your lead." Clara stood frozen for a second, watching the boy's frail movement. And suddenly she saw Aaron, her little brother, lying in the kitchen, reaching for air that would never come. The image hit her like lightning, splitting her open. Her chest heaved. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Not again." The intercom crackled again. "Flight attendants, take your seats." Marcus guided her gently into the jump seat near the galley. "We'll make it," he said, his hand briefly on her shoulder. She nodded, closing her eyes. But inside, the guilt was a storm louder than the engines. The plane dropped suddenly, a pocket of turbulence knocking gasps from every throat. Ethan gripped the seat, one arm shielding Noah. The lights flickered, then steadied. "Doctor," Hart's voice cut through the fear. "Breathe, everyone. He's stable. We're all stable." Ethan's chest ached from holding too much inside rage, fear, love, all tangled into something primal. He had fought so many battles in boardrooms, in front of investors, journalists, and senators, but nothing compared to this fight to save a child who had already fought too much. He thought of Maya again, her voice still in his memory. If it ever gets dark. "Ethan, remember, kindness is your compass." He looked toward Clara. She sat rigid in her seat, bandaged hand trembling. Something in him softened. Maybe she didn't deserve forgiveness yet, but maybe she needed it more than he needed anger. "Clara," he said quietly. She turned, startled. "You saved what you could. Thank you for that." Her lips parted, tears spilling instantly. "I don't deserve that," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but my son deserves a world where people can learn." The engines roared louder. Through the windows, city lights flickered in the distance, tiny constellations rising through dusk. "Denver, cabin crew, prepare for landing," the captain announced. The runway lights appeared, streaks of white cutting through night. The wheels hit the tarmac with a thunderous slam, then screeched as the plane slowed, shuddering under the weight of speed and gravity. Cheers erupted from the back rows, a reflex of relief. But at row 2, silence remained sacred. As the plane rolled to a stop, emergency lights flashed outside. Ethan saw them through the window ambulance lights. red and blue blending like heartbeats. "Doctor," Hart unbuckled and turned to him. "You did good," she said softly. "He's going to make it if we move fast." Ethan nodded, barely able to speak. The doors opened. Cold night air rushed in, carrying voices, paramedics shouting codes, equipment clattering, the smell of asphalt and jet fuel thick and real. Clara stood back, letting them through. She watched as Ethan lifted Noah gently into the arms of the waiting EMTs. The boy's head rested against his father's chest one last time before the stretcher took him. Ethan turned once before following them off. His eyes met hers across the cabin. He didn't smile, but he nodded, a silent acknowledgement. Not absolution, something smaller, but real. Clara felt something inside her uncoil, a quiet grief mixed with a fragile kind of peace. Marcus exhaled beside her. "You did what you could," he said softly. She stared at the empty seat in row 2. "It wasn't enough," she replied. He looked at her bandaged hand, then at her eyes. Sometimes enough just means you cared before it was too late. Outside. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The flashing lights faded down the tarmac. In the cockpit, Captain Park called for a report. Clara answered with the steadiness she didn't feel. Incident contained. Passenger transferred to medical. All others safe. When the intercom clicked off, she finally sat down, exhaustion flooding her body. She looked at her palm where the bandage had loosened. The blood had dried into a thin scarlet line, painful but healing. Somewhere in Denver, a child was breathing, and somewhere inside her, for the first time in decades, something like forgiveness began to breathe too. The cold night air of Denver bit into Ethan Cole's lungs as he followed the stretcher across the tarmac. The ambulance lights painted the asphalt in flashes of red and blue. Every step felt heavier, every breath thinner. Noah lay beneath a white blanket, the oxygen mask too large for his small face, the rise and fall of his chest still too shallow. Paramedics moved fast, their words clipped, efficient, language built for crisis. "Doctor?" Amelia Hart ran beside them, her steady voice anchoring the chaos. "He's stable for now. Keep him warm. Keep him breathing." Ethan climbed into the ambulance, the door slamming shut behind him. Inside, everything was a blur of sound. The siren, the beeping monitors, the wheels humming over the highway. He reached for Noah's hand and whispered, "You're almost there, little man. Just hold on." Back at the gate, passengers began to disembark, silent and dazed. Some looked at Clara Reynolds with judgment, others with pity. She stood near the exit, uniform wrinkled, her hair coming loose from its tight bun. Marcus Hale stayed beside her, his presence a shield. "You should head to the hospital," he said quietly. Clara shook her head. "They won't want to see me." "Maybe not," Marcus said, "but sometimes the right thing doesn't need an invitation." Clara looked down at her bandaged hand, then back at the empty jet bridge. "He said one thing before he left." She whispered, "He looked right at me. I saw it in his eyes." "What did he say?" Marcus asked. She swallowed, her throat dry. He said, "You'll want to remember this moment, because it's when you chose who you really are." Marcus exhaled slowly. "That sounds like him." She nodded, dazed. "I don't know if it was forgiveness or judgment. Maybe both." Marcus replied, "Maybe that's what truth feels like." At Denver General, the ER doors burst open. Ethan walked beside the stretcher as doctors swarmed around his son. Words flew through the air, evaccess, temperature drop, possible metabolic failure. Ethan barely heard them. He stood outside the trauma bay, fists pressed to his temples, trying not to fall apart. "Doctor." Hart approached a few minutes later, pulling off her gloves. "We stabilized him," she said, "but it was close, too close." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. The drug residue helped. She continued, "There was just enough left to slow the seizures. Whoever found that vial probably saved his life." Ethan blinked, surprise flickering through exhaustion. "Clara," he said quietly. "She found it. Doctor." Hart studied him. "She's the one who threw it away." "Yes, then maybe that sentence should belong to both of you," she said gently. "One that saves, one that forgives." He sank onto a chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Forgiveness. The word sounded foreign. He had built his entire life on reason and structure, never on grace. But tonight, the math didn't add up. The man who had every right to hate now found himself unable to. He thought of his wife again, Maya's smile, her voice, her quiet strength. She had believed in second chances, even for those who didn't deserve them. He'd always teased her for being too kind. Now he understood. Kindness wasn't softness. It was courage. A nurse approached with a clipboard. "Mr. Cole, the boy's asking for you." He followed her into the room. Noah lay small and pale under hospital lights, a tangle of wires and hope. His eyelids fluttered open when he heard his father's footsteps. "Hey, buddy," Ethan whispered, kneeling beside the bed. "You scared me for a second there." Noah smiled weakly. "Did we land?" "We did," Ethan said, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Safe and sound." "Did Sky Guardian help?" the boy asked. Voice faint. Ethan's throat tightened. "He did more than help," he said softly. "He reminded everyone what matters." Noah nodded sleepily. "Good. He always wins." Ethan kissed his forehead. "Always." The boy drifted into sleep. The machines beeped steady, rhythmic, like a lullaby of survival. Down the hallway. Clara stood alone by the vending machines, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She hadn't meant to come, but her feet had carried her anyway. She didn't expect anyone to speak to her. She only wanted to know if the boy was alive. Marcus appeared again, holding 2 cups of hospital coffee. "He's stable," he said. "They're keeping him overnight." She closed her eyes, the words landing like a benediction. Thank God. Marcus handed her one of the coffees. "You should tell him you're sorry." "Properly." Clara stared at the cup, steam curling upward. "He won't want to hear it." "You don't say sorry to be heard," Marcus said. "You say it to be true." She hesitated, then nodded. "Will you come with me? I'll wait outside," he said. They walked together down the quiet corridor. Ethan was sitting beside his son's bed when she appeared at the door. He looked up, tired but alert. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. "I shouldn't be here," she began, "but I needed to see him, to see you, to say—" Her voice faltered. "I was wrong." Ethan studied her, unreadable. "You followed the rules," he said quietly, "and almost killed a child." She answered, "I thought I was keeping everyone safe, but I was just keeping myself from feeling afraid." The room hummed with machine noise and silence. Then Ethan spoke, his tone low, steady. "Do you know what I said before I left that plane?" She nodded faintly. "Something about remembering who I am." He nodded. "That's right. Because we all get one sentence that defines us. One moment where we decide whether fear or love will speak louder." Her eyes filled. "And what was your sentence?" Ethan looked at his sleeping son, then back at her. I told the captain, "If my boy dies tonight, I hope you remember that it wasn't turbulence or fate that took him. It was someone's choice to stop trusting another human being." Clara's breath caught. That was the sentence, the one that had grounded a plane and would haunt an airline forever. Ethan stood, his expression softening. But he didn't die, because someone, despite her fear, chose differently the second time. Her tears spilled freely now. "I'll carry that forever," she said. "Then make it count," he said gently. "Don't just remember. Change something." She nodded, unable to speak. Marcus waited in the doorway, his eyes wet. As Clara stepped back, she felt something lift a weight she'd carried since the night her brother died. Later, as dawn bled across the horizon, Ethan stood by the hospital window, looking out at Denver's first light. The city stretched quiet beneath a soft mist, the sky pale gold. Behind him, Noah slept peacefully, monitors steady, the sound like a heartbeat to the world. Dr. Hart entered softly. "He's going to be okay," she said. "I'll stay on until morning." Ethan smiled faintly. "Thank you, Doctor. You saved more than one life tonight." When she left, he turned back to the glass. In the reflection, he saw not just himself, but the faces of everyone who had been on that flight. Clara's guilt, Marcus's calm, the doctor's focus, his son's fragile courage. And somewhere in that reflection, he saw hope. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet kind that rebuilds slowly, patiently, from the wreckage of misunderstanding. He whispered into the pale light, almost to himself. "We land, we fall, we rise again, outside." The first plane of morning lifted off the runway, cutting clean through the sky. The next morning, the sky over Denver was a soft watercolor of blue and peach, the kind that made even hospital glass seem gentle. Ethan Cole stood by the window of Noah's recovery room, sipping black coffee gone lukewarm, watching planes lift and vanish into the pale light. For the first time in 2 days, the engines above didn't sound like threats. They sounded like forgiveness. Behind him, the rhythmic beeping of monitors formed a quiet lullaby. Noah was sleeping peacefully, his small hand curled around a stuffed toy someone from the nursing staff had left during the night. Every few minutes, he stirred and murmured, "Guardian," in his dreams. Dr. Amelia Hart entered, her hair tied back, exhaustion hidden beneath her steady smile. "He's a tough kid," she said softly. "He'll make a full recovery." Ethan turned to her, relief visible in the lines of his face. "You stayed all night," he said. She shrugged lightly. "I didn't want to leave until I was sure." "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for being there when no one else could." "Dr." Hart smiled, slipping her hands into the pockets of her white coat. "You were there too," she said. "A lot of parents freeze in moments like that." "You didn't." Ethan looked back at the sleeping boy. "I couldn't. He's all I have left." Her gaze softened. "I know," she said quietly. "And that's exactly why he's going to be okay. Kids sense that kind of love, it keeps them anchored." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus Hale stepped inside, his uniform crisp again, eyes tired but kind. "Morning, Mr. Cole," he greeted, voice as even as always. "The airline's legal team arrived in Denver overnight. They'd like to meet with you." Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Already they want to handle this quickly," Marcus said. "Captain Park's grounded pending review. And Clara," he hesitated, "she's been suspended until further notice." Ethan nodded slowly. 1,000 conflicting emotions crossing his mind. She made a mistake, he said, but she also tried to fix it. Marcus looked at him, measuring his tone. You're not pressing charges I haven't decided, Ethan replied. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about accountability and learning something from what almost happened. Doctor. Hart watched the exchange silently, her expression thoughtful. If more people thought like that, she said softly, our world might actually heal. Marcus smiled faintly. He's not exactly ordinary. He said, I Googled you. Mr. Cole. Neurogenics, right? The tech company behind the early detection AI for epilepsy. Ethan's lips curved in a wry half-smile. Caught me. Ironic, Marcus said. The man creating technology to prevent seizures ends up fighting one in real time. Ethan exhaled through a small laugh. Life's got a sense of humor. Down the hall, Claire Reynolds sat in the hospital cafeteria, untouched oatmeal growing cold in front of her. The morning rush filled the space with chatter and clinking cups, but she heard none of it. Her bandaged hand rested beside her tray. The wound beneath had already begun to heal, but her chest still burned with the kind of pain that couldn't. She replayed the night again and again, the hiss of the compactor, the boy's trembling hands, Ethan's voice. That vial was my son's life. Every detail replayed like a confession she couldn't unhear. A soft voice broke through her thoughts. You should eat something. Clara looked up. Marcus stood beside her, holding 2 coffees. I'm not hungry, she murmured. Doesn't matter, he said. You need strength for what's next. What's next? She asked quietly. The airline's sending investigators, he said. You'll have to talk to them. Probably the FAA, too. Clara sighed. I deserve whatever's coming. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Maybe, he said. But you also deserve a chance to explain why it happened. Fear doesn't make you evil. Clara, it just makes you human. What matters is what you do with it now. She met his gaze. You still believe in me? After what I did, I believe in growth, he said simply. And I think that's what he'd want. Ethan, she asked. Marcus nodded. You didn't see the way he looked at you before he left. It wasn't hate. It was something heavier and kinder. Claire stared into her coffee, her reflection rippling with the movement. I don't know if I can live with myself knowing I almost killed a child. Then don't live with it, Marcus said. Do something with it. By noon. Ethan sat in a sterile conference room with 2 airline executives and a lawyer who spoke like a machine. They offered apologies that sounded polished and rehearsed, sentences shaped by legal fear rather than genuine remorse. We at Horizon Air take this matter with utmost seriousness. One began. Our immediate concern is the safety of your son and ensuring this does not happen again. Ethan leaned back, silent, eyes calm but cutting. And how exactly will you ensure that we're conducting internal reviews, revising our training, and reinforcing compliance? Ethan repeated softly, the word bitter in his mouth. That's what caused this in the first place. Too much compliance, not enough compassion. The room went quiet. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Cole, if you're seeking compensation, Ethan raised a hand. This isn't about money. It's about meaning. You can pay damages, issue statements, fire people. None of that changes a culture if the next attendant is just as scared, just as blind. The executive cleared his throat. What would you suggest? Then Ethan looked out the window at a plane taxiing down the runway. I want something lasting, a policy. Mandatory empathy and bias training not once a year, but ongoing. and I want it named after my son. The Noah initiative, the lawyer asked cautiously. Ethan smiled faintly. Close. Call it the Guardian Protocol. The lawyer nodded, scribbling notes. We can make that happen. Ethan's gaze lingered on the tarmac, his reflection merging with the distant plain. Make sure it does, he said quietly. That evening, as the sun melted into gold over the city, Ethan walked through the hospital courtyard. The smell of rain still lingered from a passing shower. He spotted Clara sitting alone on a bench beneath a maple tree, uniform jacket folded neatly beside her. She looked up when she saw him, her posture tense. Mr. Cole, she began, arising quickly. He gestured gently for her to sit. Please. No more apologies. She hesitated, then sat back down. The silence stretched for a few seconds, filled only by the sound of rustling leaves. I heard you refused the airline settlement, she said finally. I didn't refuse, Ethan said. I redirected toward something useful. What's that? He turned to her, eyes steady. The Guardian Protocol, a new training initiative. Every flight crew member will go through empathy, trauma, and unconscious bias education. It's not punishment, it's prevention. Clara's lips trembled. You're changing the system that broke me, she whispered. I'm trying to, he said. But systems don't change until people do. She looked down, voice shaking. I thought I'd spend my life keeping people safe. Turns out, I didn't even know what that meant. Now you do, he said softly. Tears glimmered in her eyes. I wish your wife could see what kind of man you are. Ethan's breath caught. She'd say I'm still learning, he said, smiling faintly. And she'd probably tell me to stop drinking cold coffee. Clara laughed quietly, the sound fragile but real. They sat in silence again, watching the evening sky shift from gold to indigo. A plane lifted off in the distance, its wings glinting with sunset fire. Do you think he'll remember any of this? Clara asked softly. Ethan looked toward the horizon. Maybe not the pain, he said, but he'll remember that love can land a plane. And maybe that's enough. The light dimmed, the stars slowly emerging above them. The ground beneath their feet was solid. But for the first time since the flight began, both of them felt weightless, freed not by escape, but by understanding. A month later, the world knew the story. The headlines spread across every platform. Flight attendants mistake grounds flight. Inspires national airline reform. The article opened with a photo of Ethan and Noah standing in front of a white banner that read, The Guardian Protocol Restoring Humanity at 35 feet. Behind them, an audience of airline executives, reporters, and flight crews filled a Denver conference hall. Cameras flashed, lights buzzed, and somewhere in the front row, Clara Reynolds sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the man standing at the podium. Ethan Cole looked calm but resolute. His voice carried the quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. A month ago, he began, a flight nearly became my son's last. Not because of turbulence or technology, but because of fear disguised as procedure. The room was silent, but fear can teach us. It can remind us what compassion looks like when it's tested. My son survived because, at the last possible moment, people chose to listen instead of defend, to act instead of freeze. He turned slightly toward the audience, his gaze sweeping across faces of flight attendants, pilots, and executives. The Guardian Protocol is not a corporate fix. It's a human one. It's about seeing the person before the policy. It's about asking before assuming, caring before controlling, and it's about ensuring no one, no matter their color, accent, or condition, ever has to beg to be believed again." The applause began hesitantly, then built into something powerful. Cameras captured every frame the CEO who had turned pain into reform, the father who made an entire industry confront its conscience. When the press conference ended, reporters swarmed him, but Ethan excused himself and made his way quietly to the back of the room. Clara stood there, still in her Navy uniform, though she hadn't flown since the incident. She looked uncertain, like she didn't belong in the same air as him. He approached her, his steps unhurried. "Clara," he greeted gently. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice tight. "You didn't have to invite me." "I did," he replied. "You're part of this story whether you want to be or not." She looked down, twisting her fingers together. "I don't think I've earned a seat in a story like this." Ethan's tone softened. "Maybe not yet, but showing up is a start." Her eyes shimmered. "I'm not sure how to move forward." "Start by staying," he said. "There's a panel discussion afterward about empathy and leadership. I'd like you to speak." She blinked, stunned. "Me after everything." "Yes," he said simply, "because people don't learn from perfection. They learn from mistakes that choose to evolve." That evening, the panel stage glowed with soft light. 3 people sat beside Ethan Doctor, Amelia Hart, representing the medical community, Marcus Hale, representing airline crew leadership, and Clara Reynolds, representing the part of the system that had once failed. Clara's palms were damp. She glanced at the crowd, at the rows of uniforms, reporters, and advocates. The moderator turned to her. "Ms. Reynolds, you were at the center of the incident that led to all this. What would you say you've learned for a moment?" Her voice caught in her throat. Then slowly, she found it. "That following the rules doesn't make you right," she said. "Sometimes it just makes you blind. I thought I was protecting passengers, but I was protecting myself from fear, from guilt, from my own prejudice." The moderator leaned forward. "And what would you say to others in your position?" She swallowed hard. "Ask the question before you make the judgment. That's all it takes to save a life or ruin one." A murmur of agreement spread through the audience. Marcus nodded slightly beside her, proud but silent. Ethan spoke next. "I think we forget that empathy is a skill," he said. "It's not a personality trait. It can be trained, practiced, refined. But first, we have to believe it matters more than control." "Doctor," Hart added quietly, "and in medicine, we see this too. A patient is never just a diagnosis. A passenger is never just a seat number." Applause rippled again. After the event, as the crowd thinned, Clara stood by a hallway window overlooking the city. The reflection of the setting sun lit the buildings in gold. Marcus joined her, slipping his hands into his pockets. "You spoke well," he said. She gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "I thought my voice would crack halfway through." "It did," he said, smiling. "That's what made it real." She looked down at the badge clipped to her uniform. "They want me to reapply," she said quietly. "Different position, training division." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You'd be teaching new attendants." She nodded. "About empathy, communication, handling medical emergencies, about everything I did wrong." "That sounds like redemption to me," he said softly. She turned toward him. "Do you really think people can change that much?" He looked out the window. "People can change exactly as much as they're willing to tell the truth." Clara followed his gaze to the skyline. For the first time in a long time, she saw a horizon not as distance, but as direction. Meanwhile, Ethan returned home with Noah a week later. Their house in San Francisco overlooked the water, the sound of waves whispering against the shore. Life resumed in slow, steady rhythms, doctor visits, laughter, bedtime stories. But something inside Ethan had shifted. The world felt both larger and more fragile. One evening, as they built a model plane together at the kitchen table, Noah looked up from his small hands and said, "Dad, are you still mad at the lady?" Ethan paused, the question disarming in its innocence. "No, buddy," he said after a moment. "I'm not mad anymore." "Did you forgive her?" Noah asked. Ethan smiled softly. "I think I did. Because forgiveness isn't for the person who hurt you. It's for the person who's trying to heal." Noah nodded like he understood something big. "Then maybe she'll feel better now." Ethan ruffled his hair. "Maybe she already does." They returned to the model plane, hands brushing over tiny plastic wings. "What should we call it?" Noah asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "Let's call it Hope 1, he said. Noah grinned. "Can it fly for real someday?" Ethan answered, "Someday it will." Months later, Horizon Air officially launched the Guardian Protocol across the nation. The initiative spread quickly, adopted by multiple airlines. News outlets called it the biggest shift in aviation ethics since the Air Passenger Bill of Rights. At its heart was a simple message printed on every staff manual. "See the human first," in Denver. Clara stood before her first class of trainees, fresh-faced attendants, eager and nervous. She told them her story without embellishment. She told them about the vial, the fear, the mistake, and the child. But most importantly, she told them what came after the choice to change. Her final words always made the room go silent. "We fly high above the clouds, but it's the ground below the people, their stories, that keeps us human." Don't forget that when you look into someone's eyes at 35,000 feet, when she stepped outside after class, a plane roared overhead, slicing through sunlight. She smiled, a quiet acknowledgement to the sky. Somewhere, she hoped. Ethan and Noah were looking up at the same moment, because sometimes the ripple effect of one act of fear, of courage, of forgiveness travels farther than any flight ever could. This story reminds us that humanity is measured not by how we act when everything is easy, but by how we respond when it's not. Ethan Cole's calm strength showed that power doesn't always roar sometimes. It speaks in one steady sentence that changes everything. Rules, policies, and procedures can guide us, but they must never replace empathy. In a world that often rewards efficiency over understanding, this story calls us to slow down, to look at one another fully, and to choose compassion first. Forgiveness, as Ethan learned, is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the courage to transform pain into progress. For older generations, it's a gentle reminder that every moment, even the ones born of tragedy, offers the chance to guide others through grace. The Guardian Protocol wasn't just about airlines. It was about people choosing to care again. Because in the end, kindness, not anger, not blame, is what truly keeps us alive. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey of courage, compassion, and change. If this story moved you even just a little, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that open hearts, challenge minds, and remind us what humanity looks like when it's tested. Together, let's keep telling the stories that matter. Stories that help the world breathe a little deeper, love a little stronger, and never forget the power of empathy.